Hi, I'm James McKernan. Welcome to the Scenery Farm. This is a theater flat, a soft canvas flat made by with 1x3 pine, Keystones, corner blocks, and it's all dried, and I'm going to show a video on how to make one of these. There's a little bit of a line right here. It's just a little bit of dust that got on it where there was a crease before it all tightened up. So that line is, once it primes, it'll disappear. But one of the things I want you to pay attention to, there's a rail or a toggle, pardon me, right across here, and it's not touching right there. Any of the horizontals, the internal horizontals, the toggles, they're not touching. And there's a process I'm going to show you how to do that. And if you're making, this looks similar to a canvas. I'm sure that back in the day, the creation of both these was somewhat related. This is what we call a keystone. It is attached to the style, and it attached the toggles to the style, S-T-Y-L-E. And these are the corner blocks, and they attach the rail, which goes to full width, to the style. The grain on the corner blocks goes diagonally. It's important for the grain on these to cross the seam, or the joint. The joint is here. It's important for these joints to be glued between the pieces of pine. And it's important that the canvas on the perimeter is glued to the pine. Now, there are times when you're going to build one of these where you're going to put a ridge on the face of the style and the rail so that there's a little bit of a buildup all the way to hold it off. Oftentimes, like a balloon flat, a ceiling flat, will have something like that. It'll be built out of more like Whaler. But for one of these, it's not required. This is 3/4 inch by 2.5 inch wide pine. So here's a shot of the back to show that the canvas is not glued to the toggle. And a better shot of the grain here. It's going perpendicular to the joint. Well, so when I talk about this pine being 1x3, that's a nominal dimension, meaning it's just like 2x4. 2x4 that you'd buy in the store isn't actually 2 inches by 4 inches. It's 1.5 inches by 3.5. Pine 1x3, the nominal 1x3, is actually 3/4 by 2.5 inches. And this stuff is fairly consistent at 2.5 by 3/4 inches, but everybody calls it 1x3 nominal. And that is just something you get used to. The best explanation I've heard for why it's called 1x3 as opposed to 3/4 by 2.5, aside from it being quicker, is that represents the amount of wood that was required before it got dressed down. So the theory is that this was actually 3 inches wide, and this was actually 1 inch thick, and it got taken down to 3/4 by 2.5. But I'm fairly certain that they've got the tolerances in the machines much tighter than that, so they don't lose a full 1/2 inch width and a full 1/4 inch in thickness. But meh, that's why it's called that. So I'm going to start by cutting the stiles with the 1x3 pine. What I'm going to point out on the pine, if I can zoom in a little close here, the 1x3 I'm using has a 1/16 of an inch round over. It's called film pine or film stock 1x3 from my supplier. And it's going to be really great with the theater flat because the fabric won't lean up against the sharp edge. So I have a 16-foot stick of pine here, and I've measured it. It's like 16-foot, 1/2 inch, and I've measured it at just over 8 feet long to start because I'm building, I think I'm building a 2x8 flat. Let me double check. Yep, I'm building a 2x8 flat. So this is where I'm going to start. No stop block, just lining up the cut. I'm just going to pop this piece out of the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this accurately to 8 feet. Set up the saw. Where is it? And then I'm going to take the stop block for an 8-foot cut, and I'm going to lock it into place. Now, the stiles are 8 feet minus 2 widths of 1x3. And this stock is pretty consistent. I could just take off 5 inches, 2.5 inches at the top, 2.5 inches at the bottom. But one of the things I've learned to do is not trust that all stock is the same. And I have this stop block set up exactly at 8 feet. I take 2 pieces of pine, put them side by each up against the fence, and then I put my stile right up against it. And now I have, it's going to be 7'7"-ish. And when I'm done with this, often you're doing a whole lot of them, I go out of my way and I label each one, especially if I'm going to do all the cutting all at once, because I'm going to have a big pile of stuff. That's my only 8-foot flat I'm building, so I don't have to do too many more of those. And then I have some offcuts, some shorter pieces. When you're doing a big cut list, always start with the longest piece first, and then you work your way to the smallest piece, and that way you have the least amount of offcut waste. Sometimes you have to strategize a bit more than that. And in the same way, I had the stiles be 5 inches short the overall height of the flat. The toggles are going to be 5 inches short the overall width. In this case, the overall width is 2 feet. The toggles are going to be around 1'7", but I'm not going to trust just the tape measure. On an 8-foot flat, I have a toggle at 2, 4, and 6. Now the edge here I'm putting up against the fence is an edge that I've already cut. I don't want to, the stop block, the edge that I'm using as a reference point has to be clean. Oftentimes when wood comes, it is not quite 90 degrees. It's going to have a stamp on it. Often it's going to have wax on it or some kind of sealant, which not being straight's bad. But also not having a sealant on it means that the glue isn't going to stick as well or at all. And so I have 3 toggles, 2, 4, 6, and the 0 and the 8-foot rails. The top and bottom, again, are called rails. The internal horizontal ones are called toggles, and the verticals on either side are called stiles.